Good evening everyone, Ragewood here, back with another video. Today we are looking at Godforge, and we're looking at the last hero in the three sort of legendary heroes that had their skills and such announced to us in the past week. One other thing we're going to look at though, something I just wanted to discuss briefly. If you haven't seen the Fateless video that was launched or released today, and today being the 10th of September, they talk about, or Simon himself goes through and answers some of the common questions that are put out in the community, and in that, at least to my knowledge, I think he accidentally leaks something about heroes and their ultimate abilities, which something I certainly didn't know, but has now got me thinking even more. So we're going to jump into that first. We'll look at King Arthur afterwards. So without further ado, let's get to it. So before we jump into King Arthur, we're going to just watch a snippet of the video that Hell Hades did, or Simon did earlier. And he's talking about ultimate abilities. Okay, so I'm just going to play the clip first, and then we'll digest that in a minute.
You'll be able to sort of save up the use of an ultimate to the point where you think it's going to be the right time to use it, and there definitely will be strategy to that, because different heroes will gather their ultimate strength in different ways, and some of it is just by taking turns, but also there's going to be, some people get their ultimate up through killing stuff, some people get their ultimate up through debuffing, and all sorts of different things. So at some point you can get to all of your team having their ultimate ready at the same time.
So there you go, guys. That is what I wanted to sort of focus on. All right, and pretty cool sort of effect to freeze on there as well, I suppose. Different heroes are going to charge their ultimate energies in different ways. Now, for the longest time, I've been trying to figure out what perhaps this initiative up buff was, and I thought, perhaps it was to do with your increased speed, maybe adjusting the turn order around here. And Adam even suggested, he put a good video out, that it might be sort of the defining factor on how fast your ultimate gauge sort of goes up. And that might still be the case, but it's interesting that they're designing these characters in different ways. So, for example, he said that some characters might get their turn meter gauge up by placing debuffs. And then if we look at Anubis, I'll pause it here, we'll just go take a quick look at Anubis. Here we go. So Anubis, on his core ability, or his A2, places 2 lots of debuffs. Now, I'm not saying that he is going to get it this way, but it is fascinating to sort of know and realise this. And I think it's super cool, but it also just leaves me in more confusion on what the hell initiative up does. And yeah, it just adds another layer that I'm just super excited to, dive into at some point. But anyway, let's get back to the main man of this video, and that's King Arthur. So here we are then with King Arthur and his passive. So he is the first defender that we have seen. He is an Avalonian, so sort of that sort of Arthurian legend, and yeah, this is his passive. So he reduces the damage taken from intercept attacks by 50%, and he will heal by 10% of his maximum HP when intercepting damage from an ally. So what is intercept? Essentially, none of us really know, but I imagine it's going to be something similar to what we know as ally protection in Raid Shadow Legends, where he is going to absorb a percentage of damage dealt to your allies. And when he does do that, that damage is going to be reduced, but he'll also heal by 10% of his max HP. So, again, I don't know if this is going to be Interceptors take 50% of the damage, whether it's going to be taking 100% of the damage. But it sort of gives you an idea on what role Arthur is going to be filling here. Okay, he's going to be your sturdier frontline masher, just taking a load of hits. When you look at the size of that shield, I'm not surprised. But leading back to the point that I just had a second ago, it's fascinating that, perhaps he's going to recharge his ultimate gauge by the amount of damage he takes from Intercept, or how many times he takes damage from this passive, because, I can't see any cooldown on here. So, if you're in a team of 4, they all have this sort of protection buff on them, what have you. Potentially he could heal by 30% of his HP. So really, really cool. It's a passive that we've got here. Now, unfortunately, unlike the other videos where Arthur hasn't quite been finished and animated, he's just in like a little box, so we're not going to really take a look at his animations just yet. Maybe later down the line, when they do come out, I might re-record or add a bit onto the end of this, just so that we can see that. But that is the passive. So now let's go on to his basic attacks. So his basic attack here is called Loyal Strike. He attacks an enemy for 150% of his defense and 75% of his attack. And he has a 50% chance of placing Taunt for 1 turn. Place an Intercept for 1 turn on a random ally. So lots to sort of uncover here. The fact that he scales both defense and attack is interesting. I like the fact that you're going to be building him tanky with a lot of defense and HP anyway, because he is that sort of defender, that guardian role. But also, if you happen to get, some attack percent substats rolls, or you've got someone placing increased attack, as a lot of characters in these sort of games will have, he's still going to benefit from that too, which is nice. Has a 50% chance to place a Taunt for 1 turn. Now, Taunt in the games that I have played, like World of Warcraft, for example, or things like that, you are sort of goading a particular character to attack you, so they can't use their abilities, they are simply just going to come at you with a basic attack. So he's got a little bit of CC in there. You're going to maybe want a little bit of accuracy, perhaps. And he places Intercept for 1 turn on a random ally. So this builds in with the passive quite nicely. Whoever that ally is going to, take less damage. He's going to take 50% of that damage and heal himself up, which is quite nice. I like that. There's going to be a bit of, strategy to think about here, because, if you're placing, you're going to want him to go last, really. Because if he attacks first, places an Intercept on an ally, and then they go, that buff's going to drop off. So you're going to want Arthur to be one of the slower guys in your team. So now let's go take a look at his A2, or his core ability. So his A2 then is called Excalibur's Call, and he attacks all enemies with 200% defense, 100% attack. Again, nice that we're scaling off both. And has a 75% chance to place attack down 2 for 2 turns. Increases the defense of all Avalon allies by 10% up to 30%. So, again, a couple other things to consider. He's our first, or at least from what I can remember, sort of attack down champion. Attack down 2 is probably going to be, again, what we know in other gachas, sort of like your 50% attack, and attack down 1 is going to be like a minus 25%. So first guy placing that is going to be important for any sort of boss fight we have, as well as PvP as well. So that's quite nice. But I like that it increases the defense of Avalon allies by 10 up to 30%. So again, something we don't know is what is going to define that 10% up to 30% is it a case of use this 3 times, goes up to 30%? That's what I envisage it to be, but I don't know. Can't say for definite. That would be the likely thing, though. And I like how that encourages you to use Avalon heroes. So we do have the Brazilian Archer, so you could use Arthur Pendragon with perhaps 4 of those to, increase their defense because they are slayers, if I'm not mistaken. Something else that we don't know yet, and I have sort of presumed, is what happens if you get duplicate heroes. Can you put 4 Arthurs together in one team? If you can, they all get this. They're going to all get that 30% defense really quickly and become very, very hard to kill. And that is something like Raid, for example, where you can use the same of one hero. Whereas in Dragonair, for example, another game that I have covered, you can't. You only have one legendary hero, or one hero slot, if you will, sort of thing, can be on the game. So you can only have one Arthur. So that's something cool to perhaps consider. Looking at what we know with the hero portrait sort of above my head here, we've got Arthur sort of rank 2. I imagine you can't use multiple Arthurs, which is a shame, but I don't know that for definite. It also adds into something. So Dragonair, leading on to that, one thing I've always liked about that is they have sort of affinity pairings. So if we were to bring that to Godforge, it would be, Avalon and Egyptians are paired together. You've got your Norse and your Greeks are paired together, and you've got your Kanjiki and Hindi gods paired together. And you don't have to run those pairs in Dragonair, but you get extra benefits if you do. And this sort of plays very similarly to that. Now, I don't know whether this game is going to have a game mode like we know in Raid, where there are X amount of floors which you can only do with Avalon heroes. We don't know if it's going to be like Dragonair, where just in any dungeon, if you use certain faction pairings, it's going to be like this. Or whether it's going to be a free-for-all, whether it doesn't matter what you use. And that's all to be revealed. It's something that I am excited to find out at some point, how they're going to play these roles. Where the game is quite heavily Raid inspired, I imagine we'll end up with something like a City of Sin Tranos kind of thing, where there'll be certain requirements from certain factions to meet, and that's what's going to define hero groupings. But it's the first instance that we've seen of this, where it's going to be Avalon specific, and just shows you sort of the direction that the game's going to go into, where they are going to reward perhaps using certain factions for certain things. I also like the idea that, let's say there is an Avalon only dungeon that, this is something that I've got in like a Word document of idea threads, that the boss is going to be influenced on that myth. So for example, you could have Morrigan as a character. I believe she was like, at least if you've watched a film, let's say film, TV series, Merlin, or you know anything about Arthurian legend, Morrigan or Morgraine or whatever was an evil sorcerer, a nemesis to Arthur Pendragon. Whether they're going to be the final boss, I think that would be really cool for each faction's like boss in whatever that campaign or dungeon mode is, to be influenced by myth and legend that we know. So another example would be Ragnarok for Norse. Are you going to have Surtur or Fenrir, to defeat as your final boss? Just another little tidbit that I've thought about, which I think would be really cool. Anyway, lots of talk on the core ability. Let's go jump into the ultimate. So here we go then. The ultimate, the King's Oath. Place a retaliate on this hero for 2 turns. place Immortal for 2 turns on allies with higher defense than attack, and place Vanish for 2 turns on allies with higher attack than defense. You gain 100 divinity whenever this hero counterattacks. So, let's digest some of this. Retaliate. I'm pretty certain, I'm 99.99999%, Retaliate is Godforge's version of counterattack. So whenever he is attacked, he's then going to swing back and bosh a guy. Alright. Immortal, we know that as, probably not. You can take damage, but you can't die. That's how I see that, as opposed to an invincibility or a block damage. And Vanish is going to be some sort of invisibility, so your squishies can't be targeted, your defensive people can't die. So he's going to gain Divinity whenever he counterattacks. Now, Divinity, I believe, is to do with the ultimate gauge, so whenever he counterattacks, bosh, he is going to increase his ultimate gauge. Now, what's the end goal of the ultimate gauge? He's gaining 100. Is it 10,000? In which case, it's pants. Is it 1,000? In which case, if it is 1,000, that's going to be a little bit better. Also, leading on to the first point of this, the beginning of this video, is he also going to gain ultimate gauge whenever he takes damage from his passive, from an intercept? Is he going to gain ultimate gauge whenever he gets a hit and he counterattacks? We don't know. But I like how I say it's not just a linear skill haste is what is going to determine all of your ultimate gauge recharge times. I like how it could be anything, and I think that's fantastic. Really love that. It's a lot of work for them, don't get me wrong, but I personally think that is really, really cool. Placing Immortal for 2 turns. Again, do we have the beginnings of an unkillable team here? If you can run 2 King Arthurs, do you just run a load of tanky dudes and then, or at least you play it in a way so that everyone's defense is just higher than their attack, so they get Immortal for 2 turns, and then when that runs out, you use your second King Arthur to place another Immortal for 2 turns, and you just recycle that. If it's not King Arthur, just anyone else. Maybe it's, I don't know, a Cyrus. He could be, a warrior for the Egyptians with something similar, or Ares for the Greek faction. God of War he could have against something similar. Who knows? But there's certain little tidbits that are coming in place that we see in various games, like Dragonair's Ogok and Zephy. Raid, you've got double man-eater comps and things like that. This could be the beginnings of this for Godforge. I like that. Vanish, I see, it's going to be invisibility, it's going to be like a veil, it's going to be something like that. I think will be less useful because of it, the what's the word? Because AoE abilities exist essentially. And but we don't know the ins and outs of Vanish. If you are under Vanish, do you take less damage? In which case, and if King Arthur has counterattacked and placed an intercept on you, which again I envisage to be some sort of ally protection, but that on top of Vanish, if Vanish gives you a 10% reduction, and all of a sudden AoE abilities don't do so much, and it's something he makes Arthur a real key piece for lots of dungeons. So really, really sort of cool hero concept. And yeah, I just can't wait to try this guy out. Doesn't take the top spot from Anubis from me, unfortunately. But as a defender, he appears to have a really good kit, which ties in, very nicely with various sort of other heroes. Hercules in particular, I believe. So just showing what I mean, flicking over to a video I did a while ago, and I've learnt to video edit since then, so there we are. But Herc, with his Herc Smash, does double damage if they are under an Immortal buff. So with King Arthur, providing you make Herc's defense just a little bit higher than his attack, he's still going to benefit and deal lots of damage from this here. So it's a very nice pairing. I do love that. Again, this is just, we're just scratching the surface. In the same most recent video that I just played earlier, Simon says that they have 50 heroes made now, rather than just the 15 that we have seen in sort of the demo. So who knows what it's like recycling. The possibilities are endless. Who remembers that advert? So yeah, I think King Arthur and Herc are obviously going to work very, very well. There you are, guys. Just to show you some of the things that why I wasn't really going to show some of the abilities today, because we do just have this sort of grey sandbox at the moment. But this is Simon showing the ability. So that is the ultimate, and he says to expect lots of flames and other cool things coming out there. So, I might just, doodle some like red flames or something about it. Like just pretend this is what we have here. Maybe maybe a dragonfly. Not to pick it up too much. But that's what the ultimate's going to be. So that's where he's going to place those protection buffs. His core ability now, looking very cool right there. And then he shows his basic attack there, where he's just going to sort of swing his sword in, bang on top of whoever it is. So there we are, guys. That is King Arthur. That's our little spotlight today, with maybe a small leak from Simon earlier. Thank you for taking the time to watch this today. I appreciate it all. Take care, look after yourselves, work hard, but as always, play harder, and I'll see you in another one soon. Cheers.